Hi there. So I'm back again with another video, this time talking about my clinical experience, my first one ever in a hospital. Before I get into it, I just wanted to let you know that I did have every intention of filming this like right after my shift, but I was so brain dead. Literally like A&O times 1 was where I was at. So I was not able to do that, but it's only a day later and I just wanted to kind of give you like a good explanation of what happened so that you can be prepared whenever you go for yours. So all right, let's get into it. So basically the way that my school does things, we have 9 terms. Our first term is the only term that we have without a clinical rotation. So that means going into somewhere and actually working for free, which is what it is. It's for experience, it's education purpose. But so we just learn for the first term, and then by the second term on, all the way through, we're going to different facilities. So for the first 3 experiences I've had, I've gone to 2 skilled nursing facilities, and then I actually did 1 rotation as a school nurse, or following a school nurse, which was really interesting. Did not expect that I would be doing that because I'm not a kids person. I don't have kids, but I actually really liked that. It was a good experience, I think. So finally I'm term 5, so I'm halfway through my program, and I'm just now for the first time going into a hospital and doing a hospital clinical rotation. So I was really super nervous going into this. So the reason that I felt so nervous going into this specific clinical rotation is because the only healthcare experience that I've ever had was in a private practice, which is like a really small team where you know everyone and you know how every little thing works. And to me, the hospital is just the wild, wild west. Like, it was, everyone's super sick, a lot can go wrong, and there's so many variables, and I just was blind. Like, I didn't know any of it. And a lot of my classmates who are also in the RN program, they're like ER techs or they're LPNs, and they work in the flow of the hospital. So they've seen bedside nurses, they kind of see what they do. So my advice, if you're feeling that way, if you have similar like nervousness going into this, I would first off tell you everything's gonna be fine because you are put with 1 RN all day long, and you don't do anything, you don't answer any call lights or do any treatments by yourself ever. And that was one thing I didn't know. I was like, what if I have to answer a call light and this person's critically ill, and then I mess something up and I'm the reason, like, I harmed somebody. I was so terrified of that. And then some advice I would give is what I did. The very first thing that you want to do when you do get your assigned registered nurse is to advocate for yourself and just lay out the expectations and be honest. Just communicate, hey, I've never been inside of a hospital to work before. I have a baseline knowledge of 0 right now. This is where I'm at. This is what I feel comfortable and don't feel comfortable doing, which is pretty much, I didn't feel comfortable doing anything at this point. And I want to be told what to do. Please feel free to ever tell me, like, give me direction and instruction. Like, don't feel like you're bossy. Like, please do actually tell me what to do. And she just looked at me and she was like, cool, let's get to work. And from then on, it was great because she knew that since I knew nothing, she felt comfortable to explain literally every little thing that she was doing. Whereas, like, if she thought that maybe I already knew the fundamentals or the basics of the hospital, maybe she wouldn't have explained certain things like that. Like, hey, now I'm scanning my badge into the bedroom, and now I'm scanning into the Pyxis, and because I'm entering the Pyxis, this drawer is gonna open. I was like, I didn't even know what a Pyxis was. I've never seen a Pyxis. So I was really grateful for her explaining, like, just all of the little things that maybe someone would assume that I would know as a year into an RN program, but I didn't. So that was great. And then I was basically just observing her treatments and things all day long, and then she would give me direction and kind of tell me what to do so that I could assist her. And I started assisting her in the procedures if I've seen them once, and it was great. I mean, everything was smooth. There was not this big expectation that I thought there was going to be on myself to perform and do things. Okay, so to give you a little rundown of what goes on your first clinical hospital shift is your instructor takes you up to a floor and basically drops you off like a child on their first day of kindergarten. So she says, I have the students, and then the charge nurse just like appeared out of nowhere and she was like, cool, I have 2 RNs on this floor that will take students today. And my instructor was like, go ahead, figure it out. So the charge nurse said, I have 1 RN that has 6 patients, and then I have 1 RN that has 4 patients, but the one with 4 patients has less because her patients have a lot going on. And instantly I was like, ooh, can I have the one with the 4 patients? Because I just knew, like, I know nothing and I want to see everything that I possibly can. I specifically asked for the nurse with the patients that have a lot going on. And yeah, so she assigned me to my RN, and the first thing I walked into was her doing a blood transfusion on a critically ill patient. She first did platelets by gravity, which means the IV bag of whatever is in there, which at this time was platelets, which is a blood product. It is going in by just gravity rather than an IV pump, which is used for pretty much like everything else. IV pumps are something that I had never seen before. Working in private practice, the way that we put patients to sleep was always by gravity. There was no such thing as IV pumps. But in the hospital, they have pumps that will just automatically put in the right amount of medication into the vein at the right rate for you. And you can just set it and forget it. You don't have to sit there and count the little drops and make sure everything's perfect. So that's something that's really interesting that I learned first off the bat. She was just doing platelets by gravity and then switched to doing a blood transfusion of packed red blood cells, which is just a different component of your blood. And she put that one into the IV pump to do. So I remember reading about doing blood transfusions in IV therapy class. And I remember just like looking at all of the steps that you have to take when you do blood transfusions as a nurse. And I was like, there's no way that this really happens this way in real life. There's no way. I mean, the time that nurses have and how like busy they are, how can you carry out this many steps for one, treatment? But I will tell you that yes, it is true. Like these nurses do have to do every single, like a huge long list of just identifying the patient correct. I don't even want to go into it because it will take too long, but yeah, it was not one of those like things that you read about in the textbook and you're like, I'm sure this is like one of those perfect world situations where they try to teach you best practice, but that's just not how it happens in real life. Like, no, they really do it that way in real life. So that was crazy to see. And just right off the bat, that's like how I got the ball rolling. So my nurse that I was following ended up having a terminally ill patient. So this wasn't a critical situation anymore. This was a, end of life process situation. And this is who she's doing the blood transfusion for. So on top of seeing that, the next thing that I saw right off the bat was in real life, this nurse navigating an ethical dilemma, which is a situation where the nurse finds solutions to problems with 2 sides that are conflicting, basically. So I'm sure you've heard, and if you're in nursing school, you've heard these stories about, a patient, they're elderly and they've lived a long, healthy life, but they get a terminal diagnosis. And the whole family, is there. They all come and they all accept and agree upon, they accept the diagnosis and agree upon what should happen next, which is typically something like palliative care or hospice care, which focuses on, let's just stop all of these treatments that may prolong their life or stop the sickness from developing or stop the dying process. And let's just focus on keeping the patient as comfortable as possible and enjoying our last, days with them in a state where they're dignified, they're not, just in constant pain, and they can, be happy in their last few moments and you can enjoy that with them. And then it's always this like one person that just like flies in from wherever they come from and basically disagree with everything. They say, no, I don't accept that diagnosis. I don't agree with the treatment. We need to keep on doing every preventative measure and treatment possible, everything under the sun to prevent this patient from dying. And it's always just that one person, and they always end up being the patient's power of attorney, which means they are legally the person that's that dictates their medical treatment if they're no longer able to do so. And so it's just a mess. I mean, like the people that all agree, you know, the family members that are all on the same side of, hey, let's just, you know, make sure that he's not in pain and he's able to go out dignified. You know, usually they have like nurses in the family, and there's people that have healthcare experience there that are on that side, and then the person that comes in with the opposing argument just doesn't know what they're talking about, respectfully. And it's so hard to deal with, because as a nurse, that's your job. Like the doctor gives the medical diagnosis, the nurse does all of the patient care regarding the medical diagnosis, and they deal with the family component of the, you know, diagnosis, and also the ethical dilemmas that come into that. So I saw my nurse handle this situation just so beautifully. I was in awe of her. I was like, this girl is my age. Actually, I think she's a year younger than me, but she's been a nurse for 5 years. And I mean, she took it from a situation where she was getting screamed at by the person that flew in that was disagreeing, saying, I'm the power of attorney, like don't even speak to them about anything regarding his situation, like only speak to me with updates, don't even tell them. And this is in front of the patient, in front of the whole family, just screaming at the nurse. And I saw her turn that situation into a situation where everyone was talking in a calm, respectful manner, and they were able to come to an agreement about what she called goals of expectation, I think. And that basically just dictates like a compromise where this is like what we can all agree to. We can all feel okay saying we're gonna do this, and you know, leave the rest up to how it plays out. I mean, it was amazing. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing in front of my eyes, but I think what I learned from the way that she spoke to the aggressive family member was very kind, very respectful. She never gave any opinion. She never gave any advice. She didn't insert herself in any way, shape, or form, but she said things very matter-of-factly. So she only gave facts, and she said them very, very kindly. And I think it's like the way that she spoke to them. She, first of all, listened, always just listened first, and then the only things that came out of her mouth was education and just the facts of the case. And the delivery was so respectful that you could not continue yelling at someone who's talking to you with such a kind tone of voice. So it kind of forced the whole room to like go into this space where everyone's talking to each other in a respectful way, and you know, just realizing, hey, like we're all upset, like this sucks, but we have to come to some agreement here. So I mean, just hats off to her. That was an amazing experience to actually witness in the first hour of ever being on the floor at bedside. I was not expecting that. It's just something that you hear about all the time. And then yeah, for the rest of the shift, I mean, it was just constantly doing rounds all day long. There was some scheduled treatments throughout the day, but a lot of it was just going round and round for those same 4 patients and doing whatever they need at that time. And I just was able to see so much that I've only read about in a textbook. Like I saw a G-tube. A patient was getting TPN through a G-tube, and I was able to stop that so that I could give them their Cresjet medications, or assisted, kind of like observed the nurse doing a wound care for a patient that had a stage 4 pressure injury on their sacral area. So, I mean, you could see right to the bone. It was bad. There was like muscle atrophy all around the wound, and as we were doing a wet to dry cleaning, the patient actually ended up defecating in that area, obviously. And I just saw kind of how the nurse managed that. That's what being a nurse is literally thinking on your feet constantly all day long. Is just decision-making, critical thinking, like, this is my situation, how can I make the best of it? Because it's never gonna just go the way that, you know, you planned, of course. So yeah, just seeing her decision-making process was so awesome and just so helpful for me to visualize myself in the field and actually working one day, because it's doable. I mean, she's amazing at it. So I know that with enough training and practice and 5 years in, like her, that I can be the same way too. So that was just really cool to see. And then finally, what I did was my first real head-to-toe assessment. So I've done them before, but I mean, at the skilled nursing facility, I was never like assigned to RN and like actually got to know the patients the way I did. So I mostly just filled out the reports that I needed to do for my head to toes from the software, like from the medical charts. I didn't actually go and do the assessment myself. So this was my first real head to toe assessment, I would say. And it went really, really well. And not because of myself, but because I literally got so lucky to get the best patient like possible ever for this situation. So what happened was there was a patient that came in critically ill in a really bad situation. They were able to give her really effective and successful treatment, and by the time I got there, she was already on the road to discharge. She was doing really well, and the nurse that I was following ended up being like, hey, this would be a really good, idea for you to go and do your head to toe. And I was like, oh, okay. So I go in the room, and it ends up this patient that's getting discharged, she's been a nurse for longer than I've been alive. So she's a retired nurse, and she was so funny and helpful and just awesome to do this with. So, I mean, I was literally like the nurse giving her a head to toe assessment, and she's sitting there just like giving me little pointers and kind of like, as I'm doing something like I was doing my abdominal assessment, and I was trying to listen to the 4 quadrants. And I just remember me like this, because I'm like, you have to listen for longer than 30 seconds, like whatever I've read in the textbook. And then she just goes, you're not hearing anything, are you? And I was like, no, how did you know? And she's like, well, because I think you're listening to my bladder. And then she put my stethoscope up higher and to the right area. She's like, so this is where the intestines usually are. And then right away, as soon as she moved my stethoscope, I could just hear, active bowel sounds instantly. It was just like, we were just cracking up, and I was like, thank you so much. Like, I cannot picture a better situation than this. Like, not only am I not being like criticized, but I have someone who's literally teaching me how to do a head to toe while I'm doing a head to toe on them. So, I mean, not everyone gets that lucky, but hopefully that you get some patients that are on the uptrend, and at least you can do like good A&Os and neurological assessments and things like that with. And then, yeah, that's kind of it for me. I want to just kind of focus on the attitude going into it rather than the expectation that you think you have. So the most important thing, I think, is to go into it with the attitude of like, hey, I know nothing, okay? Even though you've spent a full year, nose into the textbook, studying for hours and hours and hours and doing all these VSIMs and doing all these labs, like, you know nothing. So don't go into any clinical, like initial clinical experiences thinking like, oh, well, I kind of like know how this works. No, you don't. Just go into it saying, I have no opinion, I have no thoughts, I just want to learn, and it's gonna go so smoothly. You're gonna learn so much just important information that's gonna help you and benefit you later on in your career. And yeah, just look at it like that. Like, this is my first time experiencing something. I've seen a lot of like, I don't know, like video reels and things like that, and just like of students getting yelled at by their clinical, like whoever they're following for their clinical. And I feel like a lot of times it's because the student thinks that they know things that they just don't know. Like, you don't have the experience that these nurses that have been nurses for 5, 10, 15 years know, and just listen to them. You don't need to, prove anything. No one expects anything of you. You're literally, if anything, in their way. So you should be really grateful for the nurses that do take students, because I'm sure it would have been 10 times quicker for the nurse that I followed to just carry out all of the tasks that she has to do without having to explain it then to me as well at the same time. So, I mean, just be super grateful that this nurse is even taking you on and that you're able to be in a hospital doing a clinical with how busy nurses are. And then just be really, really, like, any little droplet of information that you do get, be really acceptive of it and receive it, and, try to nail it in your head that, like, this is real life, this is how nursing looks. So yeah, that was my experience of my first time in a hospital, dealing with bedside nursing of critically ill patients, and all of the things that go into it. It was a lot. I mean, like I told you earlier, I came home and I literally couldn't even talk. I was so tired and exhausted, not even just like physically because my feet and my legs hurt really bad, but I mean like mentally I was so tired. And I know that that's going to get better as I get used to it and I like kind of know how to navigate things better, but for right now, like all of the information was just like overload. So it actually is a good thing that I'm doing this a day later, just so that I have thought through everything. I've kind of written things down. But yeah, that was my experience. It was really positive. I did 2 back-to-back 12-hour shifts in the hospital, and then I'll go back next weekend and do the same thing after a week of class. And yeah, super excited about it actually. I'll be with a different nurse on a different unit. But yeah, I'm super grateful for the nurse that I did get. The people that I know in my cohort, they had a great experience as well. So I don't think it's just me that got super lucky. I think that we all kind of have similar attitudes. So if you go into it with that attitude, you're gonna have a great experience as well. And yeah, just best of luck to you and you're gonna be great.